voice for the most honorable, most benevolent, most merciful Judge Joker!
Yes, Joker Folie.
The French.
Joker
Flip-a-doo. How do you, like, I'm not a French man, so, like, is it, how do you say that?
Folie.
Folie-a-doo, okay.
The first one was Folie une.
There's, like, a viral clip of, like, the newscasters, like, refusing to pronounce it right, or trying to pronounce it, and then refusing to pronounce it. It's pretty funny.
Joker with a French name?
When they first released the title a year or two ago or something, I remember thinking, like, okay. I mean, that's, like, kind of marketing poison, but but I was like, well, that kind of signals to me, turned out accurately, that like we don't want to just make a commercial sequel here.
Yeah, that familiar feeling that something rank is going down out there.
Everybody knows the truth, that this movie was not a success and that it's generally disliked. But I think it's like 70-30. Like people who enjoyed it, like 70% didn't. Obviously, the studio wanted another $1 billion Joker movie, and they thought they could get it out of him. And obviously, he and Joaquin said, if we're going to do it, then we want to do something artistic and creative. And frankly, like the first one is artistic and creative. The first one is not a shameless cash grab. The first one had like an artistic angle and hook to it. I remember thinking like, there's no sequel to this unless you had a completely fresh idea. But there's no like continuation into the Batman universe or something like that.
This character of Arthur Fleck is not going to be a crime lord. This low IQ man is not going to be a crime lord. I mean, you could do it, but you'd have to just be like, I am just cashing in, baby. Like, we're just going to make this into schlock, and it'll be fun.
It'd have to be like First Blood to Rambo, First Blood Part 2, you know?
Yes.
Like an artistic movie to like just some schlock. That would be the betrayal of the first one. And this movie has been accused of betraying the first one. So let's get our chips out on the table. I liked the movie.
I mean, I didn't like the movie, but people are saying things like, it's worse than Madam Web. Excuse me, sir. Shut the fuck up.
Completely ridiculous.
Sorry.
So I don't love the movie. Yes, it's a musical, if you haven't seen it. So, which most people haven't. But there was a talk of like, well, there's music in it and there's musical aspects, but it's not a music. You know, that was Todd Phillips was saying. No, it's a musical. There are breaks throughout the movie where everybody stops and does a music number. It's a jukebox musical. If Mamma Mia is a musical, then this is a musical. I would say the musical aspect of this just simply doesn't work. There's some like dazzling sequences with dancing and music and stuff, and you know, Lady Gaga is a performer and Joaquin Phoenix is having fun with it. It completely kills the momentum of the story. It kills the pacing. It really doesn't provide us any additional story insight. Generally speaking, it does feel just kind of self-indulgent. The moment you're starting to get into the drama a little bit, a musical number will hit you right in the face. And they tend to be these like really bombastic dance numbers with lots of fantastical lighting, or they're kind of like whisper singing at each other, which is also like kind of grating and frustrating to listen to.
And they do it for a long time. The whisper scenes, like some of them, it goes on for that's when I took a pee break. Was like, oh, they're starting to whisper sing. I went and took a pee break, came back, still whisper singing in the same position. And I'm like, great. I'm so glad I didn't miss a goddamn thing.
But all right, so now let's talk about the plot. I don't know, it's maybe a year after the events of the first movie. He's been incarcerated all that time, where he tells jokes to the guards. He keeps to himself.
He's starting to be medicated, and
The guards ask him to do, he's kind of like he'll tell them jokes, and he's kind of ingratiated himself to them, but they'll still humiliate him. They'll make him like kiss a guy. And if he does get out of line, they'll smack him hard, Like the first 20 minutes were really effective and impactful, I thought.
Like, I think it was up to the first hour. I was pretty engaged, I think.
One of the days he's walking past like a music classroom, and there's like a little music class for prisoners, and he meets Lee, played by Lady Gaga. So spoilers, by the way. Spoilers. She explains that she burned down her house, killed her parents. She was abused. So they're similar. She talks about how she saw the TV movie that the Joker was in. She loved it, and she's a huge fan. She's watched the movie 20 times. He's like, oh, wow, I never even got to see the movie. The two of them try to escape together one day, which is followed by like the first big I think the second big musical number. He's thrown in the hole. She goes over there and has sex with him. They put makeup on each other. It's starting to get kind of freaky. And the background question is, can he stand trial? Is he mentally competent to stand trial? His lawyer is, what's her face from Hamlet 2? What's her name again? I don't remember the actress's name. I thought all the performances across the board were good in the whole movie.
The performance, and I would say even like just generally the direction of the acting is really good.
Beautiful cinematography. Remember that shot with the colored umbrellas?
Oh yeah. And then they switch to like black when they get back into the facility. Yeah,
great blocking too. People don't talk about blocking very often, but just the way characters move throughout a scene. What the filmmaker is holding over the audience the whole time is, will he turn into Joker? Because the reality is, Joker was the most thrilling part of the first movie. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misinterpretation. It wasn't media illiterate. If you watched the first movie and you found a sick thrill in watching this guy exact a little bit of vengeance for all he had been through, because you've been seeing things through his eyes. Now you can know intellectually that this is not the path to freedom. This is not the path to his mental health. This is not good for a city to burn it down. And that's what's cool, in my opinion. That's what's cool about this movie, is it makes you reckon with that. So you've given into your lizard impulses, which the movie intended for you to do, but becoming Joker and putting on makeup and encouraging everybody to burn it all down in vengeance is not the path to healing for anybody.
But yeah, in 2019, it was definitely, that was the zeitgeist. It was capturing that bubbling over of this nihilism in our culture. I mean, it boiled over into the 2020s, into the George Floyd riots, and then January 6th. There was a lot. It kind of captured that right before all that happened, really.
And it really wasn't aimed at any particular side of the political aisle, like you just said, because both sides have this burn it down thing, and burn it down is such an easy, cowardly thing to despair like that, to rip everything down that everybody's built.
The easy thing to do would just be like, okay, now he's the Joker.
Now we can really have fun.
Fulfill all of our sick fantasies. But it doesn't do that.
I mean, imagine that movie. The movie where you just indulge sick fantasies. It definitely would not be consistent with what the first movie set up, which is like, here's a guy who was born out of sadness and loneliness and was forgotten. Because this movie keeps getting accused of undoing the first movie, spitting on the first movie, betraying anybody who supported the first movie. And I'm like, no, I think it does an artistic thing, which is, like you just said, it investigates, like, all right, but what's the next steps to anarchy and nihilism?
It's the consequences of the first movie in a lot of ways.
And when do you ever get to see that in a movie? I just think it's so cool. Like you often think about, like, what would the trial look like for a guy like that, and you actually kind of get to see it. Yeah, a movie version of it where they let him put on makeup in the middle, and it's kind of stupid, but like, it's also visually really cool, and
it's interesting.
It fits the narrative. It reminds me a little tiny bit of we've talked about the Rob Zombie Halloween movie. So the first one was like a Rob Zombie adaptation of Halloween, and then the second one was like a sequel to that world. This is like, now Rob Zombie gets to do whatever he wants. Much like this movie, most people didn't go for it. There's something exciting, I think, about like a filmmaker taking off the gloves. Yeah. You hear that the movie was born out of Joaquin Phoenix had a dream, and you hear that Todd Phillips refused to take any notes or have any discussions with James Gunn or the studio, that he went away during the opening weekend because maybe he just knew that this movie was going to bomb. All of those things suggest that he was self-sabotaging on purpose. It's like, no, this is not a troll movie. It's an artistic pursuit, clearly. The trial gets underway. Characters from the first movie take the stand and testify. And this is one of the first times, because the first movie, you saw almost everything through his perspective. So there was unreliable accounts of everything. Like, for instance, his neighbor that he thought he was in love with. So she takes the stand, talks about how his mom used to talk about him to her mom. And finally, this guy, Gary Puddles, one of his clown friends, the dwarf, takes the stand. The guy that witnessed Arthur killing their coworker in the apartment with the white makeup, and he spares him. He says, "You're the only one that never made fun of me," and he kisses him on the head. And it's a great scene in the first movie. The guy is just so terrified. He's so vulnerable. He's so small. Not only is he small, he feels small. There's this, in a very, very Joker style, there's that moment where he can't reach the lock, which is horrifying and cruel. It's also a little bit funny. It's like, it's mocking him a little bit, which is very Joker-esque. And Gary takes the stand, and he basically openly weeps and is like, I haven't had a night's sleep since it happened. He starts begging for answers. He starts saying things like, you, Arthur, were the only one who never made fun of me, and you did this to me. Why did you do this to me? And again, the scene starts out with some great humor where, like, as he's taking the stand and you can kind of feel the gravitas of it, Joker in full makeup, he's like, go get him, Gary. You got this, Gary.
Gary. Go get him.
And he starts doing this foghorn leghorn, like he's impersonating like a Southern lawyer. He's making fun. He's like, your Christian name is Puddles?
Mr. Puddles.
And he's like, yeah, Arthur, it's my name. And
Gary Puddles?
you can tell it's starting to get at Arthur because he doesn't want to hurt this guy. This whole thing starts with a pathetic person who was abused by a civilization that forgot him. Of course you want to see that guy go werewolf and hurt his oppressors, but like here he is,
Yeah.
like you killed 5 people and we're going to hear from their families. And, I thought it was really cool and really effective. There's this scene that's getting a lot of buzz in prison, and the guard that he pisses off the guards big time with one of his big outbursts, and they beat him up, and it's implied that they rape him. Probably. That's one interpretation.
Yeah, they take off his like pants and they put him in the shower.
I don't know that scene was necessary, but I don't personally interpret that scene as the one that made him stop being Joker. So I think the Gary Puddle scene is the one that kind of shakes him loose. So in his closing remarks, he says, actually, there never was a Joker. I'm just a sad dude. And this completely deflates his entire movement, including Lee. Bomb goes off in the courthouse, implying that Harvey Dent, the DA that's prosecuting him, had his injury there. So it's a little bit like the first movie where there's like the nod to Thomas Wayne dying and stuff.
It's like it suddenly remembers that it's in the DC universe, sort of.
Because you could of course be mad, I guess, that this has nothing to do with Batman at the end of the day. So he's able to escape and he's able to run back to the steps. And it occurs to me, like as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, wow, man, like since 5 years ago, 2019, that movie has really kind of like imprinted itself on society. Like those steps and that Franklin Murray show scene, that like there is a lot of iconography from that movie that's really stuck around. But he meets her on the steps, kind of where it all started, and he's like, hey, we could go run away. We could finally do all the, they keep singing the song, we're going to build a mountain, which implies like 2 tectonic plates that are going to collide. And she's like, you don't get it, Arthur. All we ever had was the fantasy, and you gave up on the fantasy. That's what so much of like the political extremism and cultural extremism is like you're just LARPing. He's taken back to prison. He's told a joke by another inmate who shanks him. The punchline is, you get what you fucking deserve. Shanks him to death. And you can see in the background the dude carving a Joker smile into his face, implying that this was only ever an inspiration for who would later become the Joker in the DCU. That Arthur Fleck himself is not the Joker who fights Batman. He's just a sad man who kind of inspired the Joker movement. It was always a theory from the first movie, and it always seemed right based on the ages and based on the motivation, the fact that there is this comprehensive of an origin in the first place. I think it's a little precious, a little cheap, a little cheesy to have him actually carve the smile.
I think the ending is awful. I don't like it at all. Him getting shanked and the Joker smile is I think that's too much. I think it's just overly cruel to Arthur.
I think if you're going to shank him, at least like let us infer that maybe that guy's the Joker. Like don't just straight up say it.
Even with what you have here, you could have refined it into like a B+ movie. I think as it stands now, to me, it's a C-. Just because it's too annoying. It's like I'm getting like hot and heavy with a girl, and then she just like kicks me in the nuts and throws me into a cold pool. I would not be giving her a good review on Tinder or whatever the hell people do nowadays.
It's easy for me to psychologically cut out the music numbers. In fact, I probably will do that as a quick fan edit, because I really think the movie would flow nicely without them. They're really disruptive. I respect the creative urge here, but it just simply doesn't work. I'd cut out the rape scene. There's like I I would make some changes, but it wouldn't, like, I think you said it, like, it wouldn't be hard.
There was those stories that came out, because I'm sure the studio is just trying to blame Todd for everything, but it's like, oh, they never screened it to everybody. They probably should have screened it to a couple people. Did a couple test screenings, maybe a couple.
Did you hear that Terrifier 3 movie is doing like gangbusters? Like it's like beating like the Joker is the prototypical Terrifier, and it's like beating the pants off of him, because I guess that tells you at the end of the day, people just want their scary clown, you know?
If you're not going to go give people what they want, schlock, mainstream stuff, and you're making a more artful, thoughtful, challenging movie, you can't make it for $200 million. You just can't.
Yeah.
And you can't call it Joker Folie. You can't do it. you gotta do something else.
Joker Folie.
If you are going to do that, you have to make it a lower budget movie.
It definitely keeps the scope small, but I've never seen a take on Harley Quinn like this before. I thought it was a really cool interpretation of the character, like as a media horror who's obsessed with the concept of the guy instead of the. I thought it was interesting.
It's like the Charlie Manson girlfriends, you know, who were like, I'm so obsessed with you, and it had some of that feeling to it, but it was very unique. I wouldn't have thought it, and I thought Lady Gaga was going to be like a more in the movie. It's definitely more of I thought it was going to be like a dual movie, but it's definitely an Arthur Fleck movie.
I'm always going to prefer a filmmaker making the movie they wanted to make, as long as it's not complete dog shit that shits all over the audience, which this has been accused of being both of those things. I don't think it shits all. I reject this idea of like Todd Phillips was mad at the audience and this was his way of scolding them. Like sometimes it's creative to be like, all right, I've taken you on this ride. Now I'm going to see if you'll go on this ride. And I'm going to do something challenging. In a world of Disney Plus crap, I really don't want to be shitting on this movie for what it's trying to do. It's because I really think its spirit is in the right place. And I've seen Reddit is a mess with Joker talk. Reddit's just a mess in general, but there's a lot of like, if you like it, you're just a contrarian and you're just trying to whatever. And I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not. Hopefully, like my description of the movie, like imparts why I thought it was interesting and why I thought it connected nicely to the first movie. You didn't like the animation at the beginning. There's kind of a Looney Tunes style animation.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
I don't know if I agree with what it was portraying. like the shadow thing. Like I understand. Actually, I understand the concept in the later half of the movie where, you know, that it's the idea of Joker. Even like the lawyer who's like, "Oh, Joker's a separate entity," and I think like he rejects that. Everyone's trying to promote this aspect of the Joker, and I don't feel like that animation. I don't feel like it actually.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't think. It's cool. Like it's a cool flourish. But I don't think it didn't quite jive with me with where they were going with the story.
I mean, one thing I'll say, I remember we've talked a bit about El Camino in the past, the Breaking Bad movie with Aaron Paul. You know, like I feel like that movie doesn't really work. There are some scenes in it where you're like, oh, it's cool to see those characters or to see that follow up or whatever. But what was left to the imagination was more interesting than what we got. I could see somebody feeling that way about this movie, where they're like, I just think it's a more powerful story if everything that came after the Murray Franklin show was left to the imagination.
One thing I was worried about is that this movie would ruin the first one for me. And no, it doesn't. I don't think it does at all. I think it actually it's more of a realization of the first one. So I don't think it does. I think just the execution was just off.
People are talking about Todd Phillips like he's a meathead dipshit. They're kind of giving him the Zack Snyder treatment.
I don't really like slow motion that much.
You're a 14-year-old boy acting like he's an artist. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a lot more artistic than a lot of this other shit that we talk about on a weekly basis. It's like the performances, the cinematography, the sound design. Yep. Those things are all we're operating at a way higher level than the Acolyte guys, or whatever. I like stories about redemption. When people do horrific things, or consequences, one or the other. Yeah. This is about both. No. This is a story about redemption and consequences. It does ask the question, like, how could he possibly be redeemed? And it's like, I think he's redeemed by the end of the movie. Like, I think he saves his own soul by the end of this movie.
I killed 6 people. I wish I didn't, but I did.
I was rewatching some of the first one, which... a lot of, it remains a controversial film that, I think most people like it, but man, the people who don't like it really don't like it. something about King of Comedy that they can't shut up about.
Taxi Driver was the king of comedy. It's mostly king of comedy, though.
Yes,
It's Cat Taxi
yes.
Driver.
But Joaquin Phoenix's performance alone is not like those other movies. So, but you know, as I was watching kind of the scenes leading up to Murray and then the falling action. I never was a huge fan of the falling action after the Murray Franklin show. You've heard me say, you know, I think after he says goodbye on the TV and it zooms out to all the other televisions, that's probably a good time to get out of the movie.
Yeah, you don't need to murder Thomas Wayne again.
So yeah, I think maybe Todd Phillips always goes like a bit further than I want him to go. That's definitely a theme we have here. The best thing in both movies is Joker's performance on the Murray Franklin show. That complete surreal, I don't even know where I am. My plan was to kill myself. Maybe I'll kill Murray instead. You remember seeing it for the first time and just feeling like, you know, violence is just hanging over this thing. I like that in both movies, there never was a murder spree. There was really just the murder, these focused murders. But there's that voice crack that Joaquin does where he goes, because the meme, of course, you know, is you get what you fucking deserve. That's become such a huge, people saying it in earnest. But before that, he goes, I'll tell you what you get.
I'll tell you what you get.
Call the police.
Get what you fucking deserve.
You know, that little voice. I'm like, that, I think that's like the most powerful performance moment in the whole thing. Joker seems so relaxed in his own body and he's so like ready to go with anything. That's the moment where it's like, no, this whole thing is actually a sham. I don't want to be hurting people. I'm just desperate. I'm not in my right mind. There was a lot of use of like going out to TV cameras and going out to like the interview camera. There was like a lot of like security camera type stuff. I thought that was pretty effective. I thought that like, again, kind of just made me feel a little bit less like I knew what the geography of the scene was in a kind of a controlled way. It's just cool filmmaking stuff in these movies.
Harley like grabs the TV from the interview and takes it with her.
Yeah, I don't think one bad performance in the whole thing. A dream would be to see a Batman movie that is more traditional, that is set in the Gotham City we all know and love, with a story that's more at home with Batman, that has this sensibility to it. You know, not Todd Phillips because he wants to do something different, but it has that visual sensibility to it, and that kind of 1980s Gotham City. I really like this world that Joker has set up. It's just that it's constrained to this Arthur Fleck story. Maybe DC fans feel like, hey, if you're going to like sell me a Batman movie, like give me a Batman movie, you know, but on the other hand, I'm kind of like, I've seen a lot of Batman movies.
Yeah. Seen a lot of Jokers too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. In a way, like I'm kind of glad that he's not the Joker, because then I'd have to feel like I have too many Jokers. Now I get to be like, no, one of them was Arthur Fleck and it had nothing to do with anything.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.